Hola, buenas tardes, bienvenidos al segundo día de LUMAfest. Seguro que todos estáis muy impacientes por empezar ya, pero antes unas cuantas explicaciones, ¿vale? Esta charla es en inglés, así que lo más importante, si necesitáis traducción simultánea y todavía no os habéis conectado al Zoom, por favor, levantad la mano y alguien se acercará a vosotros con un código QR para que podáis acceder a la traducción. Tenéis que tener vuestros auriculares, espero que no os habéis olvidado. Así que un momentito para que todos se conecten. Bueno, tanto los que estáis conectados desde aquí como las personas que están conectadas a través de Zoom desde sus casas, tenéis la opción de escoger el idioma. Hay un pequeño globo abajo, en el panel de abajo. Si dais clic a este icono, os saldrán las opciones de inglés o castellano. Y si queréis mandarnos algunas preguntas para Elise, también tenéis o el chat para ir hablando ahí, o para las preguntas, la ventanilla de preguntas, creo que es la segunda o tercera abajo en el panel. Los que estáis aquí también podréis hacer preguntas al final, tendremos tiempo, así que ya podéis ir pensando qué queréis decir y las podéis hacer tanto en inglés, si queréis, o en castellano y lo traducimos en momento. Después de nuestra charla habrá momento para firmar libros, así que hay una caseta abajo, no nos paramos aquí, ¿vale? Vamos a organizar una salida bastante fluida, vamos abajo, hay una caseta de firmas y enfrente de la caseta de firmas, en caso de que no hayáis traído vuestros libros, podéis comprar libros en el puesto de la librería Ebla. Eneco está ahí esperando con todos los libros de Elise que están en castellano. Y bueno, por último, pero no menos importante, quiero dar gracias al Departamento de Cultura de la Diputación Foral de Gipuzkoa, al Centro Cultural Koldo Mitxelena Kulturunea y a todo el equipo de LUMAfest. Muchas gracias a todos por vuestro increíble trabajo y también muchas gracias a Maya García, que aparte de ser parte del equipo de Luma, está hoy ocupándose de Zoom, de pasar todas las preguntas que hacéis por aquí a nosotras aquí enfrente. Y también, no quiero olvidarme, no veo dónde está Leo, pero está con nosotros, ahí está, Leo Neretetti, editor de Umbriel de PUC, así que ha venido acompañando a Elise y también gracias por toda su ayuda. And now we will finally start, so I hope you have the translation already set. Well, welcome to San Sebastian, Elise.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we will start with short introduction. I'm sure you already know everything about Elise's books, but just to make the formality. Well, Elise Kova is a USA Today best-selling author. She has published 26 books. 4 of them are translated into Spanish. 26, right? I got it right. I was counting manually, just in case.
I trust you more than me at this point. They all blur together.
Well, 4 of them are translated into Spanish. We have all 4 of them in front here. The covers in Spanish are the same. These ones are the American editions. So we have the Married to Magic series, which in reality are standalone novels, but well, they are published as a series on Amazon. And then we have Air Awakens series. All of them are published by Umbriel Editores. So we hope that, well, soon we will get more. As far as I know, yes, but we have to stay put to see the exact dates. And well, all of this is even more impressive because Elise is an independent author. So she has self-published in US, and she also coaches aspiring writers. So I'm sure you will have lots of interesting topics to talk about, and well, you can have it in mind when you are preparing your questions. And well, Elise, LUMAfest aspires not only to give young adult readers an opportunity to see and hear their favorite authors in person, but also wants to promote writing skills. We have a short competition always going on before the festival, and well, I would like you to share some of your knowledge with us. So how does one become a USA Today best-selling author, and with which book did you achieve it?
So I achieved it with the 5th book in the Air Awakens series, which was, in English, it's Crystal Crown. So that was the book that hit on the USA Today, and I mean, the simple answer of how to achieve it is you sell a lot of books, but how you get there, honestly, I think my biggest advice to anyone who's an aspiring author is write the book. And I know that sounds really obvious, but so many people get worried of like, oh, it's not good, or it's not perfect, or it doesn't look like a finished book and they stop writing, or they spend all their time editing and adjusting when they really need to write. So you can always edit and improve it later, but focus on writing the book for now.
Okay, when we entered, you actually commented on this one. I don't know if you have noticed, there was some music on. I'm afraid people on Zoom couldn't hear it, but well, we here could hear the soundtrack. This is the list prepared by Elise for Air Awakens. So my question is, do you write with music, or these songs are simply the songs that you associate with your scenes, with the story?
It's sometimes both. I always write with music, but sometimes I'll hear a song and I'll just go, oh, that really feels like those characters. And maybe I didn't write to it, but it just sticks with me for them. But I'm really inspired by music.
And if you had to choose one song, one specific song that represents the Air Awakens series, which one would it be?
Clarity by Zed. That's the song that actually inspired the whole series, so it'll always have a special place in my heart.
Okay, you got the title, you can check it later. In these two first books, Air Awakens and Fire Falling, we have a really slow burn romance. So in the first book, we only have one kiss, and it's not by the main romantic interest. Sorry, there will be some little spoilers, not the main one, nothing big. And in the second book, let's say, there is some more action, but not much either. So how do you find balance between building up that expectation, but at the same time not frustrating your readers too much?
Oh, that's hard, and I honestly don't know if I succeed all the time. It's up to my readers to decide if I do or not. I think that we all love the slow burn because we know where it's going to go, but it's all of those reasons that create drama and tension of like, they shouldn't be together, but I want them to be together so badly. And I have fun writing that just as much as I think I have fun reading it. So I love incorporating that into my novels.
Well, the first two books created incredible hype, so we are waiting for the third one. I think that depends on Leo. I hope he brings it soon. I think it's this year. Okay, so this kind of romantic tug of war is also in the other two books we have in Spanish, in A Deal with the Elf King and Dance with the Fey Prince. And why do you think this kind of romantic dynamic or this kind of interaction is so, I don't know, addictive for us readers? Because it is.
It really is. I think from a story perspective, as I was saying, it creates tension, not just romantic tension, but tension in the story. There's conflict, and conflict propels story. And as the story moves forward, you're more engaged with it, you're more into it, it keeps you reading. But I also think we as people, again, maybe it's the drama that we like. We may not want drama in our lives, but it's fun to read about it, or just the wish fulfillment of like, I kind of want the really handsome dark prince who pushes away everyone else to be like, you're the one.
How did you know from the very first book that you should use this kind of dynamic? Have you written something before, or was it your very first experience with writing? Because Air Awakens is the very first novel you published.
Yes, it was. And honestly, I think it's just because that's what I enjoy reading, that I naturally gravitated toward writing that.
Okay. Well, I'll try my best to avoid spoilers, but it's quite difficult. I would like to ask so many things about the next books. Well, Fire Falling gets a bit darker than Air Awakens, so the whole plot becomes a little bit more, I don't know how to put it in words, a little bit more frustrating, let's say. How do you build this kind of tension? Is it going to get even more difficult later in the series, or how do you decide how to pace it?
It really depends series to series. I knew for Vala, for example, she starts from a very naive place, a very sheltered place, and I knew her journey was going to be her getting exposed to the world and learning about the world and its truths. And I really feel like her journey in the third book is sort of the capstone of she's transforming into her final form, but like she kind of reaches in some ways a rock bottom in the third book where she realizes that some of the things that she thought were true were not true, and she has to let go of them to keep growing and learning. And so it really kind of just depends on character to character and what every character has to learn in their story.
As you have said, Vala Jarl has this incredible journey as a character. She grows a lot, even just in the first 2 books that we know here. She starts as a quiet library apprentice, and then she becomes, well, a soldier and a totally different person. She loves books, and she loves staying alone, so I think we can all relate to this one. But then she has to get out, no, of that shell and do many crazy things. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit how you construct the characters and how you decide on their on how they evolve, on the journey they have throughout the series.
Yeah, so I start, when I think of every character, a lot of authors will have these really intense character sheets where they have everything from like the height to the eye color to the shoe size and whatnot. I'm not that kind of author. I start out with my characters by thinking of, okay, what's their name? Because I kind of need that. Some basic features, nothing too specific usually. And then I focus on what I've heard referred to as the character wound. And that's kind of they've been hurt or they've been sheltered or something in the past and they believe a lie about themselves or the world. And their journey is about learning the truth of that wound. And that usually what they think they need to fix it is not actually what they think they want to fix it is not actually what they need. And so that for every character is always really fun to find, and I usually start with that point in the character and building them.
Talking about the characters, which of your characters is your favorite?
That's so hard. I love all of my characters and I can't stand all of my characters at the same time because they will do things and I'll be like, why? Why did you do this? Vala will always hold a special place in my heart because she was my first main character. I really had fun writing Florian. I kind of alternate how I say her name, honestly, but it's the 3rd Married to Magic book, which will be out July 4th, I think it is. And she's a blacksmith, and so to research that character, I actually went and studied with a blacksmith and got to forge my own dagger because I really wanted to learn what her life was like, or at least a little bit.
That's the 3rd or the 4th married?
3rd. Did
3rd.
I say
okay,
4th?
so that's a duel with the vampire lord.
A duel with the vampire lord, yeah.
Okay.
If I spoke
you already
wrong,
have the date, in August. Okay. In Air Awakens, which, well, is the first book, you created a very complex world. So how do you approach the world building in general, and has it changed from the first series to the next ones?
Definitely has changed as I've grown as an author. So I'm more of a pantser as an author. There's pantsers and plotters. So plotters plan out everything and they know their story. I kind of know the main events and where I want the story to end, and then I find everything else along the way. And the same is true of my world building, where I'll have some ideas for the world and I'll have some loose constructions of what I want the world to be. But then a lot of times as I'm drafting, I'll be like, oh, but wouldn't it be cool if there were dragons or, something else? And then, of course, I have to go back and I have to edit in so it makes sense or cut it out in editorial. But a lot of my world building is like that as I'm writing. When I'm planning, the little bit of planning I do, I ask myself a lot of questions. So I think about, okay, I want to write a story about elemental magic. Well, what does that mean for the world? What does that mean for how it's shaped commerce and business and people? Does everyone have magic, or does only a few people have magic? Because all of that affects the world that's created.
The books that we get here come with the map at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Do you have the map before, or do you decide on how it's located after?
I usually draw the map before, but sometimes, as I said, things will change when I'm editing, and I'll have to fix it later before making the final one.
Do you have any reference when it comes to world creating among other authors, or do you have any favorite authors that actually were a very, very good example for you when you were starting?
I think that I grew up with reading Tolkien with my father, so definitely, him. But my sister loved Robert Jordan, So I had that influence as well. And of course, Brandon Sanderson, I think, is one of the best world builders out there. And if you're someone who's writing or just curious about storytelling, he has a lot of resources.
I think actually I've read somewhere that your favorite quote is from Tolkien, the one, "Not all who wander are lost." Or
Yes.
Well, I don't remember the exact quote.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
What does it attract you so much in the sentence?
So I have always been horribly afflicted with wanderlust, and I love traveling places and meeting new people and seeing new things. But sometimes I don't always know where I'm going or why I'm going there. It's just a feeling of like, I should go. And I like the idea that you don't have to always have a plan. Sometimes not having a plan is the best way to get to where you need to be.
Okay, that might be a weird question, but you wrote Air Awakens in 2015 while you were in Japan?
A little bit earlier than that for the first drafts, but yeah. In 2012-ish, 13, somewhere in there. Time is weird.
Did the fact that you were in Japan, that you were in a foreign country, affect you in any way? Was it the reason you started writing, or was it just a coincidence?
I mean, I can't say it didn't affect me, because of course something like that does. But I had a friend there who was really into writing, and that kind of reignited my passion for it, because if I'm being totally honest, I went to college and then I did a master's program right after. And after reading and writing everything for school, I was so tired of reading and writing that I didn't want to do it for a year or two. So it was really nice to reconnect with that passion of mine.
I've heard you are a fast writer. How long does it take you normally from the initial idea through the first draft up to the final, published version?
So the initial idea can be anywhere from 6 months to years, where I just kind of have an idea that I'm sitting with, that I'm thinking of, and doing some of that initial world building, and is this a story or is this just a world, and when does it become a story? Once I start drafting, I can draft a first draft around 110, 120,000 words. In the span, if I'm going slowly and just relaxed, usually 3 to 4 months. But I can write faster than that if I have to, but I spend a lot of time in editorial, as I was saying earlier, and that usually is anywhere from 6 to 8 months, because I just have to put it down and walk away and come back to it with fresh eyes, because if I don't, I run the risk of just setting the manuscript on fire because I think it's terrible and I hate it.
So it wouldn't be true that you wrote Air Awakens, the whole series, in 1 year, or yes?
It is, yes.
Okay. So, well, this one went faster.
Yeah, that was when I was first starting writing, and I was just like, ooh, this is fun.
Okay, there are 2 scenes with Vala that I find incredibly empowering. So one is when she creates the storm in the first book for the first time, and then the second one is when she destroys one in the second book. And I was wondering if you had any reasons to choose wind as her element, or was it spontaneous? And then if there is a reason, what's the meaning behind it? Why wind?
It is a really lame reason. I wish I had a better answer to this question. That was very thoughtful, but I knew I wanted to write elemental magic because I wanted to write a story that was easy for anyone to pick up and read. And if you say elemental magic, everyone sort of knows how that works. I try and put my own spin on it, but you kind of have a rough idea. It's easy to pick up. And so when I was thinking of the main character, I was like, okay, well, what element do I want her to have? And I am really into nerdy stuff, and I love video games, and I love Zelda Wind Waker. And I was like, if I add an L, it becomes Wind Walker, and I like that. So that was literally how I decided.
What's the meaning? Well, I think I know, but let's see if I'm right. What's the meaning behind the fact that Aldrich, and well, at some point, Vala too, they wear black? Why is Aldrich always in black?
I think, I don't remember what book in the series, it's not really a spoiler, but he talks about feeling like he's the black sheep of the family and that expression. Also the association with black and witches and wizards and that sort of thing, and obviously I like black as well, so.
I was thinking about that second part. Yes. Okay, I was wondering also about your standalone novels. They actually seem, well, both that we have here seem to be inspired by some myths, known myths. So A Duel with the Elf King reminds us a lot of Hades and Persephone, and also Beauty and the Beast, I think. And then A Dance with the Fey Prince of Cinderella and Psyche and Eros. I was wondering if it was consciously made as a retelling or not really, and then if the next books in this series are going also to follow that pattern.
So yes, more or less. Similar to Air Awakens, I wanted to write something that felt familiar to people, maybe not same, but easy to pick up and read. But I didn't want to write a true retelling because I felt like that would place too many limitations on me, where I would be like, oh, well, I have to have this component and this component. So that's why I say it is heavily inspired by, but it's not intended to be a literal retelling of any of those. The third book in the series doesn't really have a myth per se attached to it, but it still has Beauty and the Beast vibes, and it also, I was a little inspired by like a Snow White retelling, but kind of the huntsman is the main character, the girl, and the guy is the Snow White-esque character. And then the fourth book in the series, which is on my mind because I'm working on it right now, that one is one of my favorite myths, which is the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, but with a happily ever after.
I know that you have started writing these books in the pandemic.
Yes.
So what was the reason for this specific format and for this specific happy ending that we have there?
Well, you know, I'm aware that I wrote a book about a girl being kind of trapped in a castle during the pandemic and everything working out okay. But I wanted to write something easy. I had just wrote a really big epic fantasy series that was really complex, and I'm like, I want to write something that I would want to read. I would want to relax. I want something that just makes me feel good. And it was a time where I went, okay, I think we all could use something that's just to make us smile and feel good at the end. And I wrote a standalone because I honestly didn't know if it would sell well. And I'm like, I don't want to start a big series and get roped into something that everyone hates. But I had ideas, so I'm like, please do well, because I want to write more books.
Do you know how many you are going to write in Married to Magic series?
At least 5. I don't know, I have more ideas, but it started as a passion project, and at this point, that's one of my main goals, is I want to still have fun with them, and I want my readers to still have fun with them. And if I feel like one or the other isn't there, then that's the time to stop. And that's the nice thing about standalones, is that you don't have to worry about, oh, I need 2 more books to finish.
Okay, you say 5, so I imagine we can more or less imagine what will be the next ones about looking at the map of Midscape, right? Of who lives where. You have a clue there, I think, no?
Yes. I think that's very astute.
I wish, but I think that was quite easy. Okay. Do you have well, you said that you have the favorite myth. Do you have a favorite fairy tale?
I don't think so, because I like so many, and I like the original fairy tales too, like less of the Disney version and more of like the Brothers Grimm type versions. But they're all very interesting to me. I'm maybe Beauty and the Beast, but.
Okay, we got very relaxed with the happy endings, so we'll get back to some more tragical topics. Is it difficult to kill your characters? And, well, do you ever mourn them? How do you decide who to kill?
It is very hard to kill characters. There have been some characters that I've killed that I wrote it, and then I said, I can't change this in editing because I want to, but it's the right decision to make. So I have to be strong as an author, even when I'm very sad about it. As far as who to kill, a lot of times I think about, does the death have a purpose? Because I don't want to just kill a character for shock value. And And so I want there to be kind of a narrative underpinning to that happening, but I also at the same time want there to be those stakes where readers do feel like, oh, someone could die in this book. Just, you know, casual death.
If you haven't read the second book, The Fire Falling, there is one death that for me was devastating. I didn't expect that, I have to say. I was wondering, as a fellow nerd, if your love of video games, manga, anime, affects in any way how you construct stories, or which topics do you choose, or do you think it's totally disconnected?
Oh no, I'm sure it's absolutely connected. I mean, I think from anime, growing up watching it, like I loved those moments of, you know, the character who's beaten down and then like they pull themselves on the ground and they're like, I'm gonna fight you now, and then they just go full power, that sort of thing. And so I think that there are those types of moments that appear in my stories. And video games too, it's such a magnificent storytelling medium that video games are so visual and so immersive that I just want to be like, oh, I want to write a book that gives you that feeling.
I've heard that you were thinking of writing fan fiction, and I'm not sure if you have actually ever written any or not really.
No, because when I got back into writing, I thought about writing fan fiction, and I knew myself, and I knew I was going to get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of words into something, and if it was a fan fiction, then I couldn't do anything with it, not without a lot of editing. And so I went, okay, I'm going to write something that is original. Let me take the time to make something that's myself, and that's how Air Awakens was born.
What fanfic were you tempted to write?
This will be obvious if you've read Air Awakens and know the description of Aldrich. At the time, was very into Loki from the first Thor movie. So that's what you can imagine.
Now you have the picture of Aldrich in your head, Aldrich Loki, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering about some more technical aspects. You wrote Air Awakens in third person, but Married to Magic is written in the first person. So I imagine that those of you who are writing are wondering, how do you decide which style is the appropriate? What should be the point of view of the story?
It's one of those, there's no right answer to it, so do what feels right to you, for you and your story. I do think that there are sometimes genre conventions that can sort of dictate, like super high epic fantasy usually is in third person, but there are exceptions to every rule. I think for Air Awakens, I wrote that in third person past because that was a lot of what I was reading and had read, because I did grow up reading a lot of epic fantasy. But for Married to Magic, because it is such a personal story and it's a love story, I felt like the first person present really helped me connect more with Luella, the main character, and hopefully helped you as a reader connect more to her. And I actually wrote the first chapter in third person and just went, oh, this doesn't feel right. Let me try writing this again in first. And that just clicked with me.
You also share with your readers on your website or by newsletter some deleted scenes. Are there any that you wouldn't share, and why?
That I wouldn't share?
Yes. And if there are, why?
There are some really steamy scenes that I cut that are not well written that I probably wouldn't share, mostly because they're not well written. Otherwise, I think just scenes that don't add any value or any interest to the reader. I think the scenes that I like to share are the scenes where I go, see how different this is, and this is why stories change and why I change to things.
Do you like lemon tart?
Lemon tarts?
Yes.
Is there a reference there other than
Yes.
Vala's preference? I mean, I do, but...
I was wondering, well, this is a fangirling question more than anything, but I was wondering if Vala likes lemon tart because of you or because of some other reason.
No, I kind of like the idea of having her like something that could be both sweet and sour, and also probably influenced by Game of Thrones at the time and Sansa's love of lemon cakes.
I was wondering where it came
Yeah.
from. Why lemon? Why specifically this one?
Probably a number of things, but I do like lemons, lemon tarts.
You write young adult fiction, new adult, adult fantasy. How is writing for each of these age groups different? And do you know at the beginning of the story which group it is directed to, or do you decide while you are writing?
I think I write across the board, but I think I kind of sit sort of in the same area of kind of older young adults or adult fantasy that can also appeal to a crossover audience. But it really depends on the story at the end of the day. And there have been times that I've gone to my editor and I've said, here's a young adult series. And my editor has said, no, it's not. Love it. It's great, but it's not. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay, one more technical question. In US, you have self-published, and abroad, we have talked about this one a little bit before we sat down here. Abroad, you are publishing with publishers, local publishers. So I wanted to ask you, how is the difference in both experiences? And then how did you approach self-publishing? So maybe it's a little tip, for the aspiring writers here.
Yeah, so independent publishing I love because I'm actually really into like business and marketing and all of those sorts of things, and you have that control when you do it independently, that you can see all the different aspects of your business. You can get live data or as close to it as possible, and you can take action and see if it helps or if it doesn't help, and all of those things are really fascinating, I think, and I get jazzed about. However, for outside the US, really, I don't know Spanish, unfortunately. I wish I did. And so if I hired a translator, I couldn't check if it was a good translation or not, a faithful translation or not. I don't know what's working in Spain with Spanish readers as far as what book would make sense to translate. Do I keep the original covers or do I not keep the original covers? And those sort of things, having a partner like Udano, like my other foreign publishers, is really helpful. And I do get to still collaborate on the project, but at the same time, I get that insight from those markets where I get to say, okay, if you think that's best, I trust you and I'm excited for it. And usually we're all in alignment, so that's really nice too.
What do you think about these negative stereotypes that we often hear about young adult literature, that it's not as serious as, literature directed to adults, and how would you answer these people how would you convince them that it's, as valuable as any other age group literature?
I think if someone has that opinion, there's only so much that convincing that I would try to do, just because I think if someone holds that in their heart, then they're clearly closed off to something that's really good, and it's their loss at that point. But if someone is open to it, I think my biggest thing is young adult literature, one of the cornerstones of it is coming of age. It's finding who you are and what is your place in the world. And I think that is something that is so quintessential to the human experience. Like, we have all, at some point in our life, felt the outsider. We've all felt awkward. We've all felt, what's my plan? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? And that's not something even that's unique to being a young adult. I think, goodness, I was in my mid-20s when I was still having those questions of like, who am I and where am I going? And I think that is something that's so special about young adult literature. And it's also fun. Like, a lot of times they're just really fun books.
What do you think about this terrible debate that we have about some especially young adult, but not only books, being banned? So I don't know, some months ago, especially in US, there was a huge list of books, and many authors ended up on the list that really, it didn't make any sense that they are there. So what do you think personally about the whole situation?
I mean, generally speaking, I don't think books should be banned. I say generally speaking because, as I said earlier, there's exceptions to every rule, and every now and then there is truly something that's deeply harmful. But even then, I think that an outright ban is never the way to go. More asking someone, okay, why do you want to read this book if it is something that is that extreme level of questionable? But I think that if you try and ban a book, you're trying to ban knowledge, and that just, it never works out well. Historically, the people who ban books are not on the right side of history, generally speaking.
Okay, we are slowly going to start with the question from the public. I have more questions, but well, just in case we have a huge amount, you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and someone with the microphone will get to you. And Amaya also, if she has questions on the Zoom chat, she will also bring some. So if you have questions, just raise your hand, okay? And I will continue until someone, well, gets courage to ask. I'm sure you have many questions, so we can start. Okay, I wanted to ask you about your favorite authors, not necessarily young adult, but in general, your favorite authors, and if you have any reference apart from Tolkien when you are writing.
A lot of my favorite authors right now are like my peers that I'm friends with as well. And so I'm biased, but I do think they're insanely talented and you should read their books. So like Danielle Jensen, I think writes amazing books. Susan Dennard, I love her stuff. I just started reading a book by Carissa Broadbent. I'm so sorry if I said her name wrong, that I think is fabulous. So I love reading authors across the spectrum. One author from the past who wasn't Tolkien that had an influence on me was Dave Duncan. I was at a low point in my high school life, and I had a teacher who was like, I just think you need this book right now. And it was Magic Casement, which is the first book of A Man of His Word, and it meant so much to me at the time. I haven't gone back and read it because it's like that special memory, and I don't want to go back and be like, oh, this book is actually not good. So it could be great, but I'm like, I'm not going to risk it.
What's the most emotional story that you have read as a teenager that you think is this one that you would like to recommend to someone who goes through difficult moments, apart from the one you have mentioned?
Oh, that's really hard.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I just feel bad. Like we were talking about earlier, it's like once you have to pick a book, you're just like, there are no books. They just don't exist anymore.
That's my little revenge. Just before we started the interview, she has asked me what authors are the most popular here. And I thought, I have no idea.
I honestly can't think of any. I'm so sorry. As soon as like we're shutting down, I'm just gonna shout out a book title and I'm gonna be like, that's the book.
Okay, what was the most emotional moment for you as a writer?
Gosh, there's been so many. So the most emotional good was probably when I was able to quit my job and become a full-time author. It was also emotional terrifying as well. It worked out, spoiler alert, but it was definitely a leap of faith moment. But I will also add, because I think it's always important to add when talking about something like that, is I was very privileged to be able to do that. I had been working a good corporate job at the time. I had a little bit of savings and I had family that was supporting, where that could support me as well if things didn't work out. And so I always like to caveat with that, because if you're someone who's writing and who's trying to become an author, we all have different starting places. And so don't feel like, oh, well, Elise did this at this point in her career, or any other author that you like did this at that point in their career when they were this old. Everyone is on their own race.
Is there one kind of genre that you would like to try and you haven't yet?
I would really love to write a contemporary romance. I think that would just be fun. But I would also really love, and two ends of the spectrum, to write a horror, like a gothic horror that's just weird and quirky. I love things like Call of Cthulhu and like weird, horrifying things, so that would be.
Do you have a favorite horror story?
Oh, it would probably be one of Poe's horror stories. Like, The Telltale Heart comes to mind. It's a classic and maybe a little cliche, but I love any kind of horror stories that leaves you feeling more uncomfortable than scared. Like, maybe a little scared, but.
More psychological type of thing.
Yeah,
Then.
that kind of thing.
Okay, if anyone is brave enough, just raise your hand, really. Later you will regret if you don't ask now. Okay, we have one here, and then we have one also there at the back.
Vale, hola, buenas tardes. Sí, quería saber cómo eliges las portadas o cuál es tu papel en la elección de ellas.
I would like to know how you choose your covers, or what's your role in deciding what's on the cover.
Because I'm independently published in the US, I have the privilege of getting to select and work with illustrators myself. But I do try and have it be a very collaborative process, because I go to an illustrator because I like their style or I like their artistic eye, and I might give them some guidance, but I'm also like, the cool thing about a book is there can be 10 different ways to read it and interpret something. And so I like to see the way they want to bring something to life and leave room for that as well.
Hi, Elise.
Hi.
I'm so happy. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you for coming. and the rest of you
I
too.
fucking love you. So one of my questions is, have you planned writing some romance, sapphic romance for the Married to Magic series?
I don't have any plans for that right now. I always say never, because the second that I say I'm not doing something, then my muse is like, but what if we did that? So I don't have any plans right now, to be honest, but who knows what the future holds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You said one of the questions, you didn't have another one, or sorry. Hay tiempo, ¿eh?
De todos los libros que has escrito, ¿cuál es tu favorito?
Of all the books that you have written, which one is your favorite?
So Air Awakens, again, it was my first, so it means a lot to me. And Elf King was a passion project, so that means a lot to me. But if I ruled those two out, I would probably say, no, I'll stick with the deal with the Elf King right now. I'll stick with that one right now. Oh,
If one
hi.
of your books would arrive to the cinema, which one would you choose?
So if it were a movie, I think I would probably pick Married to Magic books, because I think since they're a little bit smaller stories, they would do better as a movie. I would love to see Air Awakens maybe more as like a series. I think it would do really well in that format, like maybe not HBO, but that kind of budget.
As a woman in the industry, have you faced any problem that you think your male colleagues wouldn't have faced?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I still get, both in and out of the industry. Within the industry, I have some great colleagues who are women who are just rocking it and ruling the world, and I love just being around them because I'm so inspired by them. But outside of the industry, I've been in an Uber before and, you know, making small talk and been like, oh yeah, I'm a writer, and the person will say, true story, the person was like, oh, it's so good your husband supports you in your hobby. And I'm like, yes, me and my hobby. Or, you know, at a convention or something, I've had a male author come up to me and be like, I could give you some tips on how to promote your work. And I'm like,
Nice mansplaining.
definitely a little bit of that energy. And I'm like, I want to trust that this is coming from a good place, but the vibe is not checking out.
Okay, anyone else?
Hi again.
Hi again.
I want to know, because I feel like some vibes of Avatar in Air Awakening series, but not the James Cameron's.
Yeah, not blue people,
aliens
animated.
yeah, not the blue ones. Do you find inspirations on the series, or? Sorry, I'm sick.
Oh no.
I have a chronic disease on my pulmonar, so sorry. Do you find inspiration on Avatar, on other books, anime like this, or is just my...
So, very few people believe me because people are like, well, obviously you were inspired by Avatar, but I had never seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I wrote Air Awakens, started publishing it, and was working on other series in the Air Awakens world, and as I'm working on editing Air Awakens, I was like, maybe I should read Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like 2 or 3 books are out in Air Awakens at this point, and all my friends went, you cannot watch it until you're done writing it. Like you have to, at this point, you just have to wait. So I have finally seen it, but it wasn't any kind of conscious inspiration.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other question? I have some from Zoom. If you ever decide to write another genre, would you write it with the pseudonym, or would you write with your own name?
I would probably, if I wrote in another genre, because I've debated this, as of right now, I would lean toward having a different name for that, just because for a lot of business reasons, it makes a lot of sense in the publishing industry to have, one genre, readers know you for that thing under that name, and then a different genre as another name. But again, I never say never.
Are you ever inspired when you write by any everyday, things, like, I don't know, other, some experiences, travels, other books, news?
Absolutely. I get inspired by just about anything and everything, from the mundane of I like baking bread. I have a sourdough starter, and I'm like, I really want to write a baker character at some point that's just cozy and sweet. Or when I'm traveling, I get inspiration from all kinds of places. I was really inspired the first time I went to Barcelona, not this trip, but one trip before, and that's helped inspire different things in my book, so everything.
Out of curiosity, were you baking before the pandemic, or have you started at the beginning?
I get that question a lot. No, my sourdough I started about 2 years before the pandemic. But it was perfect because all of my friends who were getting into baking, I went, oh, I can give you some starter here. It's 2 years old, it's ready.
As a writer of fantasy directed to young adults, what book do you think that your books are more kind of an escape from everyday world, or do you try to transmit some values? And if you try to transmit some values, what would it be? Yes.
I think it varies from book to book. I want my books to be an escape, and I think that one of the great things about books is they provide us a safe place to deal with some of the hard thoughts and feelings. And so I think that reoccurring themes in my book, if I do things correctly, would be just things like accepting yourself and who you are, loving yourself and the people around you. I'm really big into found family. That family are the people you choose, and if that's blood, and if it's friends or unrelated, then that's your family just as much. So I definitely think that, if anything, I guess I want to have an underlying message of hope, whatever that is, at the end of the day.
At least in the books that we have translated for now, you can see a lot of importance on the fact of choosing something. Not necessarily love, but your way, in life. So yeah. I think definitely you can see this one in your books. One more from the Zoom. Do you have any kind of superstition when you are writing? Any kind of, habit, must do?
So I have a lot of weird writing quirks. One of my things is if I start getting momentum on a draft in a particular place, I have to keep writing in that place. So I found that I had really good momentum at like the edge of my kitchen counter for one of my books, and my husband would just be like, why? And I'm like, it's where the words are coming. This is the word zone. So that would be one thing. I also like crystals. I think they're very pretty, regardless of if they have powers or anything. But so I'll be like, I'll put a crystal on my desk and I'll be like, you're gonna fix all of my writing difficulties today. And it's just the placebo effect, I think.
The title of the 5th book in Our Awakens, it's slightly corrected, no? The Crystal Crown,
Yes,
if I
Crystal
remember. We have one more question, yes, from the public.
Hola de nuevo. No sé si funciona. Sí, ¿no? En tu país, ¿qué tal está considerada la literatura infantil y la juvenil?
In your country, what people think, how is young adult literature and literature for children considered? How is it seen?
I think it's seen overall very positively. It's very popular in the US. And I think that, of course, there are people who judge it, just like there are people who judge it everywhere, unfortunately. But I feel like it's seen as important and good.
Hi again.
Hi.
Personally, I think you would be a real good writer from urban fantasy.
Oh.
I don't know if you have any ideas on this kind of novel or.
I have some ideas, but they're not ready yet. Like I said, I will take an idea and I'll just kind of like put it in the back of my head. And if I come back to it, then it has potential. And if I don't, it just needs to sit and grow a little more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? We have one there.
Hi.
Hi.
If you could only write books from now on with only one trope, like slow burn or enemies to lovers, but only one, what trope would it be?
Well, I mean, I think slow burn and enemies to lovers, those two are kind of my thing. If I had to pick one, I would pick slow burn of the two. Yeah, that would probably be the one. But I probably will just keep writing that too.
Anyone else? We don't have much time left, so it's the last moment. I can't see anyone. I'm not sure if I'm missing anyone. No? Okay, so I actually want to ask you one question that will be useful for us as a, literary initiative. So what authors do you think we should invite in the next editions? And why?
Anyone published by Urana?
That was also my answer to her question at the beginning.
One person who came to mind, I mentioned her earlier, is Susan Dennard. I honestly have no idea if her books are in Spanish and if they are, who's the publisher. But I was talking with her once about how she approaches her craft, and she is just like a mad genius when it comes to her and her storytelling. But her brain works so differently than mine does that it's fascinating for me whenever I hear her talk about her approach to writing. And everything from, she has these things called magical cookies that are like a way that she does it, to, I think one time she was telling me how she wrote the whole book from one POV chapter and then did a different POV, like start to finish. And I was just like, how does your mind work?
I'm very sorry, but we have run out of time. So
no.
Thank you, Elise, a lot for a wonderful conversation. I'm sure all of us will remember for quite a long time. And please wait a moment, a few announcements before you leave, okay? This one in Spanish to make it faster. Okay, os queremos recordar que mañana seguimos con el programa de LUMAfest. A las 4:30 tenemos un taller de creación poética. Todavía os podéis apuntar si queréis a través de nuestra web o por Eventbrite. Es taller con Leire Vargas, así que una persona con experiencia podéis mirarlo y mirar lo que hizo hasta ahora. hora. Y luego a las 5:30 empezamos con firma de Victoria Álvarez. Así que a las 5:30 ya estamos firmando libros. A las 6 empezará la charla. Y bueno, luego ya veremos si seguimos con firma o no. Esperamos que lo más posible firmaremos antes. Y antes de que empecéis a bajar, os queremos pedir que salgáis de la sala de manera ordenada, que nuestro equipo os irá indicando más o menos cómo, en qué orden ir. Y por favor, si podéis, dejad el ascensor para la gente que más lo necesite, ¿vale? Y Elise estará firmando libros abajo, así si queréis ya podéis empezar a formar cola abajo, y también tenéis el puesto de librería Ebla, si no habéis traído vuestros libros. Y muchísimas gracias por haber venido hoy. Un aplauso para Elise, enorme. Bueno, muchísimas gracias.